The Interlopers. A man stood watching and listening one winter night in a dark forest on the eastern side of the Carpathian Mountains. He acted as if he were hunting game, but this man was hunting a different sort of animal. Ulrich von Gradwitz was searching for a human enemy. His family's large forest land was full of game. However, few animals could be found where Ulrich waited. Still, Ulrich guarded this land jealously. In a famous lawsuit during the days of his grandfather, his family had won back the land from a neighboring family. The losing family had no legal claim to the land, but they they never had accepted the court's ruling. For 3 generations now, the two families had been enemies. Okay, so now you want to pause and reread the first 2 paragraphs. Now that Ulrich was the head of his family, the fighting had become personal. Ulrich detested George's name, his wearing neighbor. George went on killing game in Ulrich's forest. The feud continued because the two men hated each other so much. On this windy winter night, Ulrich had ordered his servants to watch for thieves in the forest. All the animals in the forest usually hid in safe places in bad weather, but tonight they were restless. Something was upsetting the forest and the animals that night. Ulrich could guess what it was. So you want to pause here and answer the question in the left-hand margin. Ulrich guesses what is disturbing the animals. What do you think is disturbing them? He had his watchers hiding on the hilltop. Then he wandered alone, listening through the wild, whistling wind for poachers. His greatest wish was to come face to face with George's name, to meet him alone. As he stepped around a huge tree trunk, he met George. The two enemies glared at each other for a long moment. Each held a rifle, and each had hate in his heart and murder on his mind. Finally, they had the chance of a lifetime, but neither could just shoot a man in cold blood without spoken word. Before either could act, a fierce wind blew against the massive tree over their heads. With a splitting crash, the tree thundered down upon them. Ulrich found himself on the ground with one arm numb beneath him, the other arm caught in the branches, and both legs pinned beneath the trunk. Twigs had slashed his face, causing him to blink blood from his eyelashes in order to see. George lay close by his side. He was alive and struggling, pinned down like Ulrich. Ulrich was glad to be alive, but he was angry at being trapped. He mumbled a strange mixture of thanks and sharp curses. "So you're not dead, but you're caught anyway," George cried. "What a joke. Ulrich von Gradwitz caught in his stolen forest." "I'm caught in my own forest," Ulrich replied. "My men will free me soon. Then you'll wish you hadn't been caught stealing game." George was silent a moment, then answered quietly, "Are you sure your men will find much to release? I have men too. They're in the forest tonight, close behind me. They will be here first. When they drag me out from under these branches, it won't take much clumsiness on their part to roll this trunk on top of you. Your men will find you dead under a fallen tree. I'll send condolences to let your family know how sorry I am." "That's a useful plan," said Ulrich fiercely. "My men had orders to follow in 10 minutes, and 7 minutes must have passed already. When they get me out, I'll remember that plan. But since you will have met your death while poaching on my land, I don't think I can decently send any condolences to your family." "Good," snarled George. You and I and our men will fight this to the death, with no interfering outsiders here." Both men knew that they might be defeated or found too late. Which team would get there first was a matter of chance. Both stopped struggling to get free. Ulrich managed to get his wine flask from his pocket. Though it was a mild winter and Ulrich felt the cold less than he might have, the drink warmed and revived the wounded man. He looked over at George with a throb of pity. "Could you reach this flask if I tossed it to you?" asked Ulrich suddenly. "There is a good wine in it. We may as well be comfortable as we can." No, I can't see to catch it, said George. Anyway, I don't drink with an enemy. Ulrich was silent for a few minutes. An idea was slowly forming in him, an idea that gained strength every time he looked at George. In his pain and weariness, the old hatred seemed to be dying. Pause here and respond to the question on the right-hand side of the page. In lines 67 through 68, what do you think is Ulrich's idea? Make a prediction about it on the lines below. Neighbor, he said, do what you like if your men come first, but I've changed my mind. If my men come first, they will help you first. We have fought like devils over this stupid forest. I see we've been fools. If you'll help me end this fight, we can be friends. After a silence, George spoke. Think how people would stare if we rode into the market square together. No one living can remember our families being friendly. And if we choose to make peace, there is none other to interfere, no interlopers from outside. I never thought of anything but hating you, but I think I've changed my mind too. Ulrich von Gradwitz, I will be your friend. Pause here. The word interlopers in line 77 is important because it's in the title. Underline the context clues that help you figure out the meaning of interloper and write your definition on the lines on the left-hand side. For a time, both men thought about the wonderful changes peace could bring. In the cold, gloomy forest on that windy night, they lay and waited for help. Each prayed that his men would arrive first. Then he might be the first to help his new friend. Soon the wind died down. Ulrich said, "Let's shout for help." "Our voices won't carry far," said George, "but we can try. Together then." The two men cried out. "Together again," said Ulrich after waiting a few minutes. Then he said, "I heard something that time, I think." "I heard nothing but the cursed wind," said George. After a few minutes of silence, Ulrich gave a joyful cry. "I can see figures coming through the wood." Both men shouted as loudly as they could. "They hear us. They're running down the hill toward us," cried Ulrich. "How many of them are there?" asked George. "I can't see clearly. 9 or 10, said Ulrich. "Then they are yours," said George. "I only had 7 men." "They are hurrying as fast as they can," said Ulrich gladly. "Are they your men?" asked George. "Are they your men?" He repeated impatiently, as Ulrich did not answer. "No," said Ulrich with a strange laugh. It was the idiotic, chattering laugh of a man full of hideous fear. "Who are they?" asked George, straining his eyes to see what the other man wished he had not seen. "Wolves." How might the story's surprise ending show Saki's message in this tale? So that's the last question you want to respond to on the left-hand side on the bottom of the last page.